to helping Lance win the Tour de France. And slowly that goal, of course, had changed. As we went through each stage, we had Popo and Dimitri and Ross working always next to Lance throughout the flat days, always keeping Lance out of trouble and with the wind and stuff like that. And after the cobblestone day, we had so much bad luck. Literally, we went into the first cobblestone section. The plan of the day was to take control of the peloton before the first cobblestone section and go in there at the front with the whole team. Instead, we went in the top. We said we went in with Saxo Bank leading, going in the first cobblestone section, but we had 7 or 8 of us in the top 25. And I was in the top 25, and I was always behind Lance, sweeping his wheel and making room for him in the corners and keeping him out of trouble so that he could come through the corners safe before we got onto the cobbles. And when we entered the cobblestone, and at the first cobblestone section, and I looked up and I saw 25 guys, and we have 7 or 8 of us in the top 25, I thought that was a perfect scenario. I thought this is absolutely fantastic, the best scenario you can ask for, because we had Clody, who's a climber and has never done Paris-Roubaix, myself, who's never done Paris-Roubaix or those kind of cobblestones, and I'm a climber, and I'm on the very light side of the weight scale. Levi has never done the cobblestones. Lance has passed over them once in one of the Tour de France's from years back, but really doesn't have a lot of experience on the Roubaix stones. And so when I came into there in the top 25 and all my teammates were in front of me, I thought this is perfect. We'll let Saxo Bank do the work for the first 2 sections, and then we'll take over from there and we'll deliver Lance through the last dangerous section of cobbles in the front, and he can work his magic and start putting time into the favorites. And instead what happened is Clody's wheel exploded, so we lost Clody and Sergio dropping back to help Clody. Later Frank Schleck crashed, and that took out Levi and myself. Levi ended up making it back up to another group, but then at the same time Lance had flatted further up in the cobblestone section. That took out Popo. Well, first it took out Rast, who gave Lance his wheel. Then it took out Popo, who waited for Lance. And then at the same time that was happening, Levi flatted, and Yanni gave up his wheel to Levi. So we lost literally everybody in the number 3 and number 4 cobblestone sections. And the whole team had exploded. So when we got to the finish of the day and Lance had lost maybe 50 seconds, I believe, to Contador, I thought, wow, that was amazing. We had the worst possible luck imaginable, and we came out of here with only 50 seconds. And so the rest of the team, Lance was extremely upset after that stage. Extremely upset. The tension in the bus was high. But I really thought, hey, at the end of the day, if you lose the Tour de France by 50 seconds, we can go back and complain. But at this moment, I think it's an amazing job how we come out of the cobblestones with Lance only losing 50 seconds. And so mentally, I was still prepared to work for Lance and help him win the Tour, and so was the team. And then when we hit the second mountain stage summit, it was after the first rest day, was the second mountain summit finish when Lance crashed basically 3 times. And after the second crash, he went down hard, and we were going up the climb. He had 4 guys with him to bring him back along the flats. Yanni and I had waited at the back of the field when the next hard climb started to grab Lance somewhere along the climb and bring him to the front. And realistically, he only had about 3 or 4 miles from the time he crashed to the time the next climb started. And the next climb was a really difficult one. And so I thought for sure he would never be able to get back to the group before the climb started, but they did. Our guys did an amazing job. Popo, Rast, Demi did just a fantastic job, and Paulinho. All 4 of those guys. I was personally doing 350, 400 watts going before the climb even started. So the kind of watts they were doing back there to get Lance on must have been amazing. And so they got him on right as the climb started. Then Yanni and I took over and got Lance to the front of the group. And we got about halfway up the climb when it came over the radio that he was having some difficulties. And as soon as I heard it, I rode straight up to Lance's side. And Yanni and I looked after him up that climb, hoping that we could get him back on. But he just was having such a hard time after the crash, and the effort that he had done from the crash and picking himself up to get back to the group was so big. I don't think anyone really realizes the amount of effort that it took for the 5-6 miles to get from there to the front of the field that he had to use there. So by the time we got to the middle of the climb, he was already maximum for 15 minutes longer or 20 minutes longer than anyone else had been there. So if he had arrived at the base of the climb, we would have been over the climb with that 15 or 20 minutes.
It was the steepest climb.
The beginning was incredibly steep, and the last part, right where it was flunking, was actually the part where it started becoming less steep too. So that extra 15-20 minute window that he used energy on would have easily gotten him over that climb, no problem. And then we would have just had to deal with some minor damage of whatever happened for the last climb if he couldn't have recovered by then. But after that stage, then the roles had really started changing in the team, because now we had Levi, who was on GC, and we had a team classification that was looking like a goal too, and then we were switching from going from helping Lance win the Tour to going to individual stage wins, a team classification win, and helping Levi hopefully get onto the podium still at that point in time, because he was sitting 6th or 7th on GC and still a real legitimate shot at going podium with the time trial and the other climbs coming up. And so as each day went by, things were just changing rapidly on where our goals were, and it slowly had changed into, wow, okay, first we got to get a stage win, because your goals when you go to the Tour de France have to be first to win the Tour de France, second to podium at the Tour de France, third to win a stage at the Tour de France, and after that you start looking at team classification, mountain jerseys, sprint jerseys, and anything else you can grab from the Tour that can get you headlines, being in the breakaway for long periods of time and stuff. So I found myself changing as a rider for the last 3 years. I think you go back all the way back to 2005. I've been a rider that at the beginning of the race I do nothing. I follow wheels, I eat, I rest, and I don't use ride. I'm a domestique, so I don't have other riders helping me out at the beginning of the race, but I don't have to use any energy for the leader yet. My job comes at the finish of the race, and then I start working for the leader. But at this Tour de France, all of a sudden now I was covering breaks that were going from mile 0, and then covering attacks that are happening at the end of the race, and then racing for the team classification going up the last climb. So I was doing the start, the middle, and the end, and so it was getting a little bit taxing on myself trying to recover. And at this level of the sport, you can't ask Contador to go out there and go, hey Contador, I want you to cover 10 attacks at the beginning of the race. I want you to go get bottles throughout the middle of the race. And then, oh yeah, I want you to go up the climb for team classifications. And win the Tour at the same time. It's at this level you can't do it. And so there would be days where hopefully I could do a little bit less work, and Paulinho was doing his job great, Dimi was doing his job great, Ras, they were covering all the moves early, and I would just cover some of the stuff that they were missing and jumping in. But even when you're spending that kind of energy, it was kind of taxing. And then it went to later we were trying to focus on, as Lance's form was starting to return again, we were trying to focus on getting Lance into a break and then helping him win a stage too. So stage 16 was the day that I spent in the break. It was an incredible day at the Tour de France. One of the reasons you go to the Tour de France as a bike racer is spectacular. People were dying and exploding all over the course. And the first, we started from kilometer 0, and it just went straight up the hill for 6-7 miles, went straight down the hill through a short valley, and then straight up the next climb that was just as long, if not longer. And at one section, we were on the second climb, and it's Lance and I in the front group that was changing from 10 guys to 20 guys rapidly. It would get smaller group, it would get larger, and then it would go smaller again and larger again as guys were coming and going. It was just amazing. You didn't know what was going on. And so my sole job that day, and when we started, was just to keep Lance out of the wind as much as possible on the first 2 climbs. And Lance had told me it felt spectacular. And so when we went over the first climb, I rode out in the wind for Lance. The second part of the first climb, I rode down the valley with 4 other guys on the front. I rode through the valley with the same 4 guys. We started the next climb. I rode out in the wind for Lance on the next climb. And then Lance told me he's feeling great and he's going to tag. And I said, okay, okay, good job, because I'm out of here, I'm done. And so we got halfway up the second climb, and the group accelerated, and a few of us dropped off, and I saw the Contador group was about 20 to 25 seconds back. So I eased up, and my power meter dropped considerably, and so I recovered a little bit, got in Contador's group, and then power started going back up as Lotto was doing just an incredible job trying to bring the Lance's group back, because they had Vino up there now. That was a threat that was taking over Lotto's position on 5th on GC. And so they were chasing like crazy. And as we got near the top, I looked back, and we're 1K from the top, less than half a mile from the top. And the third group's only about 15, 20 seconds behind us. And the Contador group was now sprinting the last K to the summit to try to catch the front group, because they were only 20 seconds, 15 seconds away. And so I backed off again and went to the third group. And so I knew the third group would catch the Contador group. I just didn't know if they would catch Lance's group. And so the third group wanted to send Contador's group again. And so I got some Cokes and ate as quickly as I could. I ate as much as I could and drank as much Coke and drank as much water in bottles as I could, because I hadn't had any time the 2 climbs before to do it. And as we reached the third climb, which I believe was the start of the Tourmalet, which is a really big climb, we hit that climb, and at the bottom of the climb, I was like, oh my God, I'm dying here. And I looked down, and my power meter's reading 550 watts at the start of the climb. And this thing's like 12, 15 miles long, the steep section, and I think it's almost 25, 30 miles long total. And so I looked down at the power meter, and I was like, oh, okay, it's 550 watts. You're supposed to feel like this. So it actually made me feel a little better. And so at this point in time, I realized, of course, that my group and the Lee group had come together, but I didn't know where Lance was. And so I looked up ahead, and I had heard in the radio that Lance was up the road, and I looked up ahead and saw a Costa Pun rider and knew that, oh, there's one Costa Pun rider, so there has to be one of us for the team classification. And so I jumped away, and next thing I know, I'm back in the front group with Lance again, working for Lance over the climb. And so I went literally from Lance's group to the second group, to the third group, back to the second group, and then back up to the first group with Lance again. And we went all the way to the final, and Lance did amazing attacks going up the last climb, the Col de Solaire, I believe it was. And he put in a huge effort there to try to get away, but he split the group in 3 pieces, but it just came back together just before we started the last little summit onto the finish. And then once you come down to the line with the type of sprinters we had in the group with us, it was pretty hard for us to win. But from that stage, after that stage is really when it had turned into, instead of working for Lance or working for Levi or working for Clody or covering breaks in the early part of the stage, it had gone to, okay, Horner, you're free to stay fresh all the way to the last climb, go up the last climb and race for team classification, and make sure we put more time in the Castellan riders before we get into the time trial, so we can have a little more cushion to play with. And so when we hit stage 17, the Tourmalet stage, I just had fantastic legs, because finally I could rest throughout the first part of the stage, rest throughout the middle of the stage, and then just do the last climb. And so the last climb went really well for me. Not as well as I'd hoped, but really well. And I ended up finishing 8th on the stage. And then it moved me back into the top 10 on GC that stage. And so I got to ride that stage for myself, and then I got to ride the TT for myself. And I was quite happy finishing the Jordan 10 and 10 overall after the amount of different objectives we had gone through in a 3-week period.
So